Just before we begin today's video, a quick word from this video's sponsor, Surfshark VPN. Look, if you're online, your data is being tracked. It's just a fact of life. And Surfshark, they stopped that, so I guess it's not a fact of life if you use Surfshark, which is great. That's what Surfshark are all about. It's a VPN. It encrypts your browsing so no one, not your provider, not advertisers, not hackers, can see what you're doing or where you are. You can even set your virtual location to anywhere, which is great for privacy or just accessing region-locked content. I mean, the amount of stuff you can get from streaming services if you're in one location is extremely limited. Just fire up Surfshark VPN and reload Netflix. You got to quit it and then open it again. You'll get so much more stuff. It's really cool. One account covers unlimited devices, so your phone, your laptop, your tablet, they're all protected. Plus, with Clean Web, Surfshark blocks malware, ads, and trackers before they even load. Go to surfshark.com/ITS or use the code ITS at checkout to get 4 extra months for free. That's surfshark.com/ITS. Your data, your rules, and now today's video. Scientific racism, eugenics, misogyny. Ideas that, in any truly modern and civilized society, should be relegated to the dustbin of history. Yet for years, Stefan Molyneux managed to amplify these themes, parlaying them into a platform that brought him notoriety, wealth, and a fiercely loyal cult-like audience. He styled himself as a champion for those who felt marginalized by mainstream culture, people convinced they were being singled out or dismissed as conspiracy theorists and every other ist under the sun. Today, we're going to explore the story of Stefan Molyneux, guru of the alt-right, advocate of libertarian thought, and king of controversy. Stefan Basil Molyneux was born in Ireland on September 24th, 1966. His family relocated several times, first to London and then, when he was 11, to Canada. As a child, Molyneux appeared bright and well-rounded. After secondary school, he initially studied theatre at York University, performing at Theatre Glendon, while also joining the campus debating society, an early sign of his appetite for contentious ideas. He later pivoted from the arts to academia, earning a bachelor's degree in history from McGill University and a master's from the University of Toronto. Then, in the 1990s, Molyneux and his brother Hugh founded Caribou Systems Corporation, an environmental database software firm that they eventually sold in the year 2000. With that exit, Molyneux turned again to a new arena: media. 4 years later, he launched Free Domain Radio, one of the early podcasts funded entirely by listener donations. Subscribers contributed anywhere from $5 to $100 a month in exchange for varying levels of access to Molyneux and his self-styled teachings. At first, the show revolved around relatively benign themes: philosophy, libertarianism, atheism, and anarcho-capitalism, or the belief that a stateless society governed purely by free markets and voluntary exchange could replace centralized governments. Over time, however, Molyneux's content drifted into more troubling territory. He began promoting pseudo-therapeutic ideas, such as the dangerous claim that mental illness isn't real. Larger donors were even offered private therapy sessions with him, which amounted to unqualified advice that only risked harming people who needed genuine professional help. Today, he has released thousands of podcasts, each one seemingly more controversial than the last. As Molyneux's profile rose within libertarian circles, he attracted the attention of prominent figures who shared his ideology. He began collaborating with many of them, inviting like-minded guests onto his podcast and contributing to their platforms in turn. Among his new associates was Lew Rockwell, the libertarian publisher and right-wing activist who founded the Mises Institute in Alabama, an organization devoted to promoting Austrian economics and related ideas. Molyneux wrote articles for Rockwell's website, published his own books, and even served on the Mises Institute's think tank. By the early 2010s, his reach extended even further. He appeared regularly on controversial right-wing programs such as On the Edge, Adam vs. the Man, and Alex Jones's InfoWars. Whether these alliances influenced his evolution or merely gave him a larger stage with the freedom to truly speak openly is unclear. Regardless, it was around this time that Molyneux's views and ego would start reaching new extremes. On his personal website, he likened himself to Thomas Jefferson and Aristotle, casting himself as a visionary thinker far ahead of his time. By 2016, he was publicly claiming credit for shaping two of the decade's biggest political shocks, the Brexit vote and the US presidential election. He boasted that his podcast was the #1 philosophy show in the world, amassing more than 600 million downloads, and by implication, wielding influence greater than almost anyone else online. These claims were, at best, unverified, yet they circulated among his followers and even surfaced during his 2013 and 2014 appearances on the Joe Rogan Experience. By then, though, Molyneux had already shifted focus. Once devoted to philosophy and libertarian thought, his content started veering into conspiracy territory, dismissing climate change as a hoax and increasingly echoing ethno-nationalist talking points. From there, it was a short slide into promoting even more toxic ideas, including Holocaust denial. Meanwhile, on his own show, Molyneux began platforming openly extremist guests, most notably white nationalists such as Peter Brimelow and Jared Taylor. Among his most infamous connections was David Duke, the former Grand Wizard or leader of the Ku Klux Klan. On YouTube and other platforms, Duke and Molyneux repeatedly signaled approval of each other's views, amplifying one another's audiences. Molyneux also gave airtime to South African activists promoting the white genocide conspiracy theory. This is the unfounded claim that immigration, racial integration, and eventual outright genocide form a part of a global plot to eradicate white people. He even extended that narrative into pop culture analysis, at one point insisting that Star Wars: The Last Jedi was an allegory for the coming extinction of whites. This is a connection so far-fetched that even when he explained it, few people could follow his logic. Molyneux's rhetoric grew steadily more extreme. He began openly endorsing ideas like eugenics and scientific racism, the pseudoscientific philosophy claiming that intelligence, ability, and moral worth differ inherently by race. In his framework, Black, Latino, and other ethnic minorities are cast as intellectually inferior purely because of their skin color, while white people are framed as the pinnacle of human achievement. Such beliefs have historically been invoked to justify atrocities ranging from the transatlantic slave trade to South African apartheid. Molyneux himself became an apologist for those very systems, arguing that apartheid was less about racism than about protecting whites from supposedly violent black South Africans. In the US context, he has blamed police shootings of black men not on racism or systemic inequalities, but on rap culture that he claims fosters self-destructive violence. His disdain extended to revered civil rights and humanitarian leaders such as Martin Luther King Jr. and Nelson Mandela, whom he routinely vilified on his show. Over time, Molyneux's xenophobia widened further. He rallied against non-white immigration into Europe, Canada, and the United States, and attacked Muslims, transgender people, and women, all of whom he framed as existential threats to the supposed moral order of the straight, white, Christian male. Molyneux's contempt extended to feminism, which he bizarrely recast as a form of socialism. In his telling, the movement had nothing to do with women's empowerment or equal rights. Instead, it was a sinister plot to suppress white birth rates. He even fixated on lipstick, arguing that it wasn't a cosmetic tool at all, but a devious sexual device, likening it to a man walking around an office with a massive artificial erection. On that basis, he said, lipstick should be banned from the workplace. Alright, Stefan. Chill out, mate. But these weren't even his most extreme remarks about women. Speaking at a men's rights conference in Detroit in 2014, Molyneux reportedly declared that virtually all of the world's violence could be traced back to women failing to raise their children properly. In his view, if mothers would simply pull their heads out of their rears and focus on parenting for 5 years, he claimed, war, addiction, promiscuity, and even sexually transmitted diseases would disappear completely. Which sounds very reasonable, Stefan. What are you on? In Molyneux's worldview, women, and indeed every minority group, were at the root of society's ills. Even history, he claimed, had been falsified to obscure this truth. He argued that World War II was triggered not by Nazi aggression, but by the justified German fear of a Jewish-led communist plot that had already destroyed tens of millions of white Christians in Russia. The Holocaust, he said, was merely a slight overreaction. Resulting from the legitimate fear that had been grossly exaggerated by Jewish sympathizers. Needless to say, such claims have been thoroughly discredited by credible scholars. Or, anyone with decent common sense. Yet Molyneux's ability to deliver long, confident monologues, mixing radical ideas with a rhetorical sleight of hand, left many listeners unsure how to respond, and some were even swayed by his arguments. Despite his facts being easily debunked with minimal research, hundreds of thousands flocked to his show, creating a fervent, sometimes volatile fanbase. That following has fueled growing alarm over the way his content may be radicalizing impressionable young men around the world. So, by the late 2010s, Molyneux's skill with rhetoric had earned him a fervent, almost cult-like following. With such extreme ideas circulating, it was inevitable that people began asking whether free domain radio had actually crossed the line into being a cult. For long-time observers, though, those concerns had been simmering for more than a decade. Back in the mid-2000s, Molyneux began promoting a concept that he called defooing. A family of origin, or foo, F-O-O, referred to the family someone grew up in, most commonly biological parents and siblings, but also adoptive relatives or any long-term caretakers. Whereas most people see their family of origin as a foundation of support, Molyneux painted it as a source of damage and limitation. In his telling, an FOO was often toxic and should be considered optional, with all sense of familial obligation stripped away. Severing those ties, he argued, could be one of the healthiest choices a person could make. He and his longtime partner, psychotherapist Christina Papadopoulos, even said they had cut off contact with their own biological families. Layered on top of this, Molyneux asserted that good parents don't actually exist at all, that the very idea of good parenting is a social fabrication designed to trap people into loyalty and guilt. I hope you don't have kids, Stefan. Then in 2008, stories began surfacing of young men actually acting on Molyneux's advice. In one widely covered case from London, an 18-year-old named Tom Bell left home, leaving behind a note explaining that he was defooing and would no longer have contact with his family. Incidents like this prompted groups such as the British Cult Information Centre to issue warnings and publish articles labeling Free Domain Radio a cult, with Molyneux cast as its leader. With that perception already in place, and amplified by his later remarks, the wider world grew increasingly wary of his rhetoric. By 2018, Molyneux had built a global following and teamed up with fellow alt-right Canadian YouTuber Lauren Southern for an international speaking tour. Controversy followed them abroad. In Australia, Molyneux openly downplayed the massacres committed against Aboriginal peoples, going so far as to argue the opposite, that European colonizers had done a good thing by stopping what he described as mass infanticide and supposedly carried out by violent and bloodthirsty Aboriginals. A month later, Molyneux and Southern attempted to bring their tour to New Zealand, but immediately ran into obstacles. Although the government allowed them entry, officials made clear their distaste for the pair's rhetoric. The Auckland Council cancelled the scheduled venue, citing public safety concerns and fears of violence. A backup venue was quickly secured, but its owner soon followed suit and also cancelled. In retaliation, a handful of local supporters vandalized the site. Yet these actions were dwarfed by the public backlash when roughly 1,000 demonstrators marched through Auckland to celebrate the pair's failure to secure a platform. Local politicians spoke out openly, saying they wanted no part of such hate speech in their country. As tensions rose, peaceful protesters were subjected to online harassment, and Green Party co-leader Marama Davidson received and death threats. The following year brought even greater tragedy. On March 15, 2019, 28-year-old Australian Brenton Tarrant, a self-identified white supremacist, perpetrated New Zealand's deadliest mass shooting. During Friday prayers, he attacked 2 mosques in Christchurch, killing 51 worshippers and injuring dozens more while live-streaming part of the massacre on Facebook. He was en route to a 3rd mosque when police apprehended him. Investigators later discovered that Tarrant had immersed himself in far-right propaganda, including the work of Stefan Molyneux, to whose Free Domain Radio he had previously donated. This latest controversy proved to be the breaking point when even those profiting from Molyneux's antics began to cut ties. In 2019, PayPal, his main way of processing donations, banned him over ties to anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. Soon after, MailChimp, the service he used for newsletters, followed suit. In 2020, YouTube launched a major purge of channels promoting hate speech, removing some 25,000 accounts, including white supremacists like David Duke and Molyneux, who at the time reportedly had around 900,000 subscribers. Twitter also permanently suspended him, though his account was later reinstated after Elon Musk acquired the platform. One might have expected these bans to end his reach. Yet, through his personal website and alternative platforms like Odyssey, a self-styled free speech version of YouTube, Molyneux has continued uploading videos too inflammatory for mainstream outlets. Free Domain Radio still publishes episodes on Podbean, which syndicates them to larger podcast services such as Apple. And while his high-profile mainstream appearances have largely dried up, he still pops up on sympathetic shows such as a July 2025 appearance on The Bob Murphy Show, where he discussed his evolving views on Christianity. Although bans from major platforms have slowed the spread of his content, they haven't stopped it. For many of his followers, Molyneux remains a guru, even a misunderstood visionary. But the damage inflicted by figures like him is hard to overstate. With a handful of provocative ideas, many of which he may not even fully believe in himself, Molyneux has seeded misinformation and resentment for profit. Outrage, emotional extremes, and controversy have become his business model, and unless stronger measures are taken, men like him will continue to radicalize the impressionable, causing harm that lingers for years.